Let me ask you something that might reframe everything you think you know about yourself. When you hear the word chosen, what comes up for you? Pride, relief, pride, relief. Maybe a quiet sense of validation that you were right about yourself all along. Because here's what most people do with that word. They take it personally. They internalize it as a badge, a title, an identity that separates them from everyone else. And that's exactly where they get it wrong. Being chosen was never designed to elevate you above people. It was designed to move you toward them. Think about every figure across history, across philosophy, theology, leadership, every individual we look back on and call extraordinary. Moses didn't part the Red Sea so he could have a better life. Nelson Mandela didn't endure 27 years in a cell for personal development. Viktor Frankl didn't survive the Holocaust and then write Man's Search for Meaning for his own therapy. Every single one of them was chosen, yes. But the choosing only made sense in the context of other people's liberation. This is the psychological trap that stops most people from fully stepping into their purpose. We spend enormous amounts of energy trying to figure out what our calling means for us, what it says about our worth, our intelligence, our specialness. And while we're busy looking in the mirror, the people we were sent to serve are still waiting. The psychologist Abraham Maslow talked about self-actualization as the peak of human development, that highest level of becoming. But what's rarely discussed is that Maslow, later in his life, revised his own hierarchy. He suggested there was something beyond self-actualization. He called it self-transcendence, the idea that true fulfillment doesn't come from reaching your own potential. It comes from using that potential in service of something larger than yourself. That's not a spiritual concept, that's a psychological one, and it changes everything. When you reframe being chosen through that lens, the whole conversation shifts. You stop asking, why me, and start asking, who needs me? You stop protecting your gifts and start deploying them. You stop waiting until you feel ready, because you realize that your hesitation isn't humility. It's actually a quiet form of selfishness. Every day you delay is a day someone else goes without what you were specifically built to provide. Now I want you to sit with that for a moment, because it's uncomfortable and it's supposed to be. There's a concept in philosophy called telos, the idea that everything has an inherent purpose, an end toward which it naturally moves. An acorn's telos is to become an oak tree, not to admire itself as a seed, not to compare itself to other seeds. Its entire existence is oriented toward becoming something that provides shade, oxygen, and shelter for things outside of itself. That is the nature of purpose. It always points outward. So when you think about your gifts, your experiences, the very specific combination of pain and insight and perspective that only you carry, understand that this is not coincidental architecture. You were not assembled this way for your own consumption. You were built this way because somewhere there is a problem that is the exact shape of what you carry. There is a person whose breakthrough is locked behind a door that only your story can open. The moment you internalize that, genuinely internalize it, not as a motivational concept, but as a lived conviction, everything changes. Your confidence stops being about ego and starts being about responsibility. Your boldness stops being arrogance and becomes obligation. You were not chosen because you are the greatest in the room. You were chosen because someone outside the room is still in the dark, and you are the light they've been waiting for. Now I want to talk about something that nobody tells you when you step into purpose, and it's the thing that sends most people running back to ordinary. It's heavy, not metaphorically heavy. Not this is a lot to think about heavy. I mean the kind of weight that sits on your chest at 3 a.m. The kind that makes you question everything you thought you knew about yourself. The kind that has you wondering whether you misread the signs, whether you overestimated your ability, whether the whole thing was just an inflated idea you built up in your head during a particularly optimistic season of your life. And here's what most people do in that moment. They interpret the weight as a warning. They read the pressure as a signal that they've gone too far, asked too much, reached beyond what they were meant to carry, so they scale back. They shrink the vision, they negotiate with their purpose, and settle for a smaller, more manageable version of what they were actually called to do. But I need you to understand something fundamental. The weight is not a warning. The weight is confirmation. Think about this from a purely structural standpoint. Engineers don't put load-bearing walls in places that carry nothing. Architects don't reinforce foundations for buildings that were never meant to stand tall. The degree of reinforcement always corresponds to the degree of pressure the structure is designed to hold. So when life has put you through compression, through loss, through failure, through seasons that felt like they were breaking you rather than building you, it wasn't random. It was architectural. You were being stress-tested for a load that ordinary structures were never designed to carry. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche gave us a concept that has been both celebrated and misunderstood. Amour fati, the love of fate. Not the passive acceptance of fate, but the active embrace of everything that happens, including, and especially the difficult things, as necessary components of your becoming. Most people tolerate their hardship. The chosen learn to see it as data, as design, as the very mechanism through which their capacity was being expanded. Carl Jung said something that cuts even deeper. He argued that the most difficult things we face in life are not obstacles to our purpose. They are our purpose manifesting in disguise, that the psyche grows precisely at the point of its greatest resistance. Which means the thing that is pressing down on you right now is not evidence that you chose wrong. It is evidence that you are in exactly the right place, being shaped for exactly the right moment. Now let's bring this out of philosophy and into the room you're actually living in. You have felt the weight. Maybe you're feeling it right now. The size of the dream versus the reality of your resources. The gap between who you are today and who this assignment seems to require you to be. The isolation that comes when you can see something clearly that the people around you cannot yet see. That specific kind of loneliness, the loneliness of vision, is one of the heaviest things a human being can carry. But here is what I want you to anchor yourself to. Small assignments do not produce that kind of pressure. Mediocre callings do not keep you up at night. Average purposes do not demand that level of sacrifice. The very fact that it costs you this much is your greatest evidence that what you are carrying actually matters. The weight is proportional to the worth. So the next time the pressure makes you want to put it down, pause, take a breath, and remind yourself that you were not given a heavy thing because you are weak. You were given a heavy thing because you are the only one strong Enyong, age to carry it. There's a question I want you to honestly sit with for a moment. When you look back at the hardest seasons of your life, the ones that felt most purposeless, most painful, most disconnected from anything meaningful, did you ever consider that those were actually the most important chapters of your story? Not the chapters you would have chosen, not the chapters that felt productive or intentional, but the ones that from the inside looked like nothing more than survival. Because here is what I've come to understand about the nature of preparation. It almost never looks like preparation while it's happening. We have this very linear, very logical idea of how readiness is supposed to work. You learn a skill, you practice it, you get better, you apply it. Clean, sequential, measurable, but genuine preparation for a significant purpose almost never follows that model. It looks chaotic, it looks like detours, it looks like years spent in environments that seem completely unrelated to where you're going. And in the middle of it feels like waste. But it isn't waste, it's curriculum. The neuroscientist David Eagleman has written extensively about how the brain builds its most sophisticated abilities not through direct instruction, but through accumulated experience, including experiences that seem entirely unrelated to the skill being developed. The brain is making connections beneath conscious awareness, building frameworks and pattern recognition systems that only reveal their purpose later, often much later, when a specific situation suddenly requires exactly that combination of insight. In other words, your brain was integrating your experiences into capability long before you had any idea what that capability was for. This is not just neuroscience. This is the architecture of destiny. Think about Joseph in the ancient text, sold into slavery by his own brothers, falsely accused, imprisoned for years in a system that had no interest in his potential. From the outside, and certainly from the inside, it looked like a life derailed. But every single environment he moved through, his father's house, Potiphar's household, the prison, each one was installing something. Administrative skill, emotional resilience, the ability to read people, to lead under pressure, to maintain integrity when no one was watching. By the time he stood before Pharaoh, he wasn't improvising. He was deploying a set of capabilities that had been under construction for over a decade without his knowledge. Your life has been doing the same thing. Every relationship that ended and taught you something about your own patterns. Every job that felt beneath you but showed you how systems work. Every failure that dismantled a version of you that was too fragile for what was coming. Every period of isolation that forced you inward and built in you a depth that crowds cannot produce. None of it was accidental. All of it was additive. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard said that life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. And that tension between the confusion of the present and the clarity of retrospect is one of the most psychologically difficult things human beings navigate. Because we want the meaning now. We want to understand the purpose of the pain while we're still in it. But meaning, in most cases, is only visible from the other side. So if you are in a season right now that feels disconnected, purposeless, or beneath what you believe you were made for, I need you to hear this clearly. You are not behind. You are not lost. You are not being overlooked. You are in a classroom that doesn't look like one, being taught by an instructor who doesn't announce the lesson plan. The confusion you feel is not a sign that nothing is happening. It's a sign that everything is happening, and you are being prepared for something you are not yet ready to fully see. We've talked about what it means to be chosen for others. We've talked about the weight of the call being proof of its significance. We've talked about how every season of your life, even the ones that felt like detours, was actually deliberate preparation. And now I want to bring you to the moment that all of that builds toward, the moment of decision. Because here is the truth that most people never fully reckon with. Refusing the call doesn't make it go away. We have this very human tendency to believe that if we step back from something long enough, it will eventually reassign itself to someone more willing, someone more ready, someone better equipped. And on the surface, that feels like humility. It feels responsible even. Who am I to carry this? Surely there's someone better suited. Surely the world isn't actually waiting on me specifically. And so, we wait. We hesitate, we make ourselves smaller and call it wisdom. But what we're actually doing, and this is the part I need you to sit with, is making a choice. Not the choice to opt out, because that option doesn't exist. We are making the choice to delay. And delay, at this level of purpose, is never a neutral act. The psychologist Rollo May, in his landmark work on human courage, argued that one of the greatest sources of chronic anxiety in modern human beings is not the fear of failure. It is the fear of our own potential. He called it the Jonah complex, the tendency to run from greatness, not because we don't believe in it, but because we do. Because some part of us understands exactly how much will be required if we say yes. And so we construct elaborate justifications for smallness and dress them up as patience, or timing, or waiting for the right moment. But the white moment is a myth we tell ourselves to make delay feel dignified. Think about what actually happens when you refuse the call. The assignment doesn't dissolve.